One of the barriers that we've observed to scalability, have they identified an ideal customer profile? We make a mistake in thinking that the skill set and the mentality and the mindset and even the way we perceive ourselves as a leader, as a business owner, that got us here be sufficient, for this next stage of growth. But we, in fact, have to reinvent ourselves. The number one reason stated by anyone kind of under management for why good people quit is simply bad management. Overall, workplace and just overall employment experiences were very negative. Vast majority of individuals in these industries would describe that work was in many ways a caustic aspect of their life. It was unfulfilling, and oftentimes it was a source of stress and conflict. It was difficult for staff to be able to just understand, what does doing my job correctly entail? One of the things that I've observed, and I wonder what your perspective is on this, is that oftentimes, especially in service industries, like trades-based industries, I find that oftentimes the people who own and operate and lead the companies tend to come from either a background where they are familiar with the delivery of the service, or they're very sales-oriented. People that are skilled in delivering the service that your business offers, and then they've kind of, in a sense, stepped into a position of ownership or management or leadership, I find that oftentimes they are individuals who are master problem solvers, meaning that they are just accustomed that throw anything at me and I'll figure it out. People who are sales oriented, I find, are extremely opportunistic. Now, in order to scale an organization, you need a team behind you that can catch whatever you kill, whatever opportunity you bring to the door, and then to be able to fulfill on the promise that, or whatever was committed to that client. So here's something that I've observed, and I experience it, and I have to be mindful of it, is that I definitely would resemble that kind of like practitioner and sales related leader. And I have to, in a sense, be very conscious and even temper my ambition, in a sense, because whatever I bring through the door has to be serviced and delivered, and we have to be able to fulfill whatever commitments we make. And so one of the barriers that we've observed to scalability is, has the leader or the individuals who have, I would say, a direct connection to sales and whatnot, have they learned to embrace a level of specialization of their services, or we would refer to it as, have they identified an ideal customer profile, so that, in a sense, it introduces guardrails to an extent to their ambition, and so that they are able to really ensure that a very, let's call it, defined and similar customer profile or opportunity profile is coming through the door. Because really, I think that an obstacle to growth is not the ambition of the owner. It's more likely the ability of the team to be able to consistently and predictably fulfill that service, and do so in a profitable manner that doesn't burn out your team. And so what do you think
You
about
want
that? Because I mean,
repeatability, right?
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
you need to be able to repeat it to make sure that, because I mean, one other thing is kind of real estate based services, and that's in a way in where we are. Okay, we are defined by the area of the real estate that we are in, right? And then the distances. So you always grow with multiple locations. I think that's a topic that's also coming up with any conversation that we are having with the restoration industry. You have a certain kind of like team size, group size, area size, and then you need to move to another location. And that is kind of like where my story fits in, where we have 35 to 40 locations. And what you need to make sure is that every location delivers the same quality, right, that you promise on in the first place. And for that, like my whole aim is to say, okay, any decision that needs to be made locally should be made locally, but any decision that can be kind of like made once for all should be done that way, because it reduces the stress level and it guarantees the outcome. And that is something which I think, again, is extremely important to have in context your built surrounding, because it has an effect. It's not just square footage. It has an effect of, okay, what's the layout of the property? Can I move easily? Can I do I need to carry stuff up and down stairs all the time? Do I have to, like, whatever? All of this has an effect, and it's not determined by square footage, but it's determined by actual layout, which is going to have an effect on the quality of the service that we are delivering. And to not make too broad assumptions about that, but to be really specific to that individual case and be able to judge what is considered a good service for that location. I think this is what drives much of kind of my personal decision making there, and also how we build our product, to kind of like bubble that up, that knowledge that's otherwise hidden within your team, and make that accessible to the business owner, to whomever the project lead, who's responsible in kind of like, yeah, taking those big decisions. So this is something which I think, yeah, exactly is and what you have been saying earlier. If you want to scale, you need to have repeatability, and for that you need to ensure that, yeah, the creative element should be creative where it's needed and not where it's not warranted.
Well. So let me. So an observation that I've both experienced personally as building, because what I pruned from my story is, other ventures and businesses I've built or been involved in or invested in and whatnot, and I've advised and mentored hundreds of, you know growing business owners, and so there's a lot of data points there, but I could condense it by simply saying this, is that, there's a book by a popular American consultant and advisor named Marshall Goldsmith, and the book title, you can in fact judge this book by its cover. The book is called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There," right? And as you can assume, like the book's content is really all around, we make a mistake in thinking that the skill set and the mentality and the mindset and even the way we perceive ourselves as a leader, as a business owner, that got us here, it's going to actually be sufficient, for this next stage of growth. But we in fact have to reinvent ourselves, and we have to, consider, what in a sense about me and my approach will be an obstacle to growth, and our ability, I think, to then, rectify or address those obstacles as rapidly as possible is often referred to as, when we refer to the speed of the leader. The organization will often, rise at the speed of the leader's not work ethic, but ability to be able to introspectively identify obstacles in their approach and their abilities, and either, delegate, graft in new skill, or basically change. um what I've seen, because I have this advantage of having done all these studies and all this research in the property restoration industry, and what's front of mind as you were talking about some of those things is, I'm preparing to be part of a presentation at Verisk conference coming up, Elevate, and so one of the graphs that we'll show in that presentation is, what are the reasons why people quit, right? And not just anybody, but like, what are the reasons why good people quit? So regrettable turnover, and then coupled with that is, some interesting data on what are the main causes of like good days, meaning when a worker has a good day, like, what are those causes? And so the interesting thing is that there's so much, let's say there's so much, there's a delta between how a manager and an owner responds and how the average worker responds. So, for example, the number one reason stated by anyone kind of under management, for why good people quit is simply bad management. Is meaning that, management either micromanages me, or is inconsistent, or is abrasive. And then when you ask management, why do good people quit your organization? The most common response, not the only response, but the most common response is, good people don't quit. If people can't handle the heat in this company, you know what? they shouldn't have been here in the first place. And it's this, this very cold, unempathetic response. But I can understand where they're coming from, because for so many leaders, what's got them here has been just brute force. They just have an amazing ability to work hard, to endure, to persevere, to compartmentalize stress, and to be able to execute in the moment. And I think that what you see though is a person who doesn't recognize that their patterns are introducing scalability. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's that my approach to being this kind of battering ram and just breaking down any obstacle in front of me that's worked up until now is one of the reasons why people don't stick around on my teams, people hesitate to delegate and take things on, and why, in fact, I just remain this quintessential person. On one side, it's great for my ego because I'm so essential, but on the other side, wreaks havoc on my personal life, wreaks havoc on my health, and it creates a lot of conflict between me and my colleagues. How do you think about that?
We could do a multi episode season on this one, especially in kind of like family run businesses and succession,
Yeah,
because you typically have
yeah,
the owner, which is the former, and then whomever comes next, which might as well have evolved. So yeah, I get what you're saying there, but what I think is one element that you bring from your personal experience of, hey, I need a team and I need some numbers to compare myself. That's what you are now doing in terms of doing your analysis, sharing it with the community. I think through your dialogue, also somewhat trying to create that community, which is something that I think we were trying to do with or trying to start with the capture event as well. Is so maybe you want to share a little bit about the studies you are doing, the analysis of what you are doing, and how you want to actually, I think, through that level of transparency, also help the leaders in the business recognize, okay, what are possible next steps? Where can I develop into? How can I evolve? And then you're pushing hard on also, yeah, sharing that with the team to make them like one element to what you answered earlier, like, and what I mentioned with us, kind of a sense of achievement is really what a good day. A good day is defined by a sense of achievement and little stress in my mind, right? And I think lots of talk you do about this culture and leadership and community. Okay, now I'm mixing a lot of topics, but maybe you can share some of your thoughts around this, because I think it's really this incredible resource to achieve what you're trying to achieve.
So know-how in many ways started on a pier in San Francisco, where two founders of Know-how. Know-how has three founders. Two of the three founders were kind of going through a bit of a crisis of meaning, where let's call it V1, which was actually we had been applying the technology to solve a consumer issue, and we were just recognizing that the market was really pulling us towards what Know-how is today. And so we had to do some soul searching, and and we ended up going through a lot of large scale, very trustworthy studies around the service industry, particularly we, I guess some people refer to it as the blue collar industries. And Know-how, we often refer to it as people powered companies. Companies where really people are essential to the all the moving parts of how that product or service is delivered. And just study after study after study, one of the things that was consistent, and the ranges would range between about low 70s to high 70s, is that just overall workplace and just overall employment experiences were very negative. That the vast majority of individuals in these industries would describe that work was in many ways a caustic aspect of their life. It was unfulfilling, and oftentimes it was a source of stress and conflict. And we wanted to understand that. And a common theme that we saw coming up over and over again was simply it was difficult for staff to be able to just understand, what does doing my job correctly entail, right? And then just simply the other bucket was I just have conflict constantly with my foreman or my supervisor, my boss, really around just workplace expectations around getting things done correctly. And so, what we saw in that, and I know this isn't exhaustive, but what we saw in that is, you know, we thought we thought it would be meaningful to be able to resolve for some of those what I would we refer to as kind of like sources of just rust within workforces. Um, and so, fast forward to today in these studies and all of this type of stuff, I would say one of the number one things that motivates us to do this research. So let's qualify that. What are we talking about? If you are in the North American property restoration industry, Know How is the leading researcher on topics related to let's call it the cost of business, workforce dynamics, like what are the best practices around winning with the workforce, and then really what are the broad themes. We do those studies with some very important partners. So we do one report called the Cost of Doing Business in Restoration with the Restoration Industry Association. It's the leading industry association. It's a shared report where we work hand in hand to be able to produce what we aspire to be kind of a annual benchmarking study that helps companies to be able to, in a sense, I use this term kind of raise periscope, like lift their periscope up and understand where do they find themselves compared to their peers from a financial standpoint. It's a free report, costofrestoration.com. And then we do another seminal report with our partner at CNR Magazine, I would say the leading magazine in the industry, called The State of the Restoration Industry. And we do that annually. And it's really focused on trends and patterns and what keeps restorers up at night, and what are the things where are they planning to pull back spending, where are they planning to really throttle spending, and how are they thinking about some of the boogeyman in their industry. And then we do these broader studies, topical studies, and they often show up in books and audio podcasts and things like that. And we have a practice of collaborating with leaders in the industry to be able to produce those results. In the most recent example, in September, we published our fourth book in the industry called Building Leaders. And it's built around in part the input of 12 iconic, we refer to them as leader builders, not just individuals who are great leaders, but more specifically people who are great builders of leaders. Because we identify that one of the coming crises in property restoration is just the overall lack of leader building that's occurring. So what was I saying before about all this, this kind of caustic workforce problems? We recognize that our tool at Know How, in many ways, is really around how do we eliminate friction and reasons for, let's call it, a lack of clarity and a slowdown of general operational efficiency. And so we're very focused on understanding the workforce that we need to help accelerate, but also we believe that the leaders that we write to and that we write for in our studies, that their decisions matter, and that their decisions impact thousands and thousands of lives. And so we want the results of the studies because we really have taken upon ourselves this mission of helping companies to be able to deliver what they promise through the reality of today's workforce, right? And this kind of a somewhat twist on our stated mission statement, but that's essentially it. And so we think that part of us fulfilling our promise is to arm those leaders with the best information possible so that the decisions that they make, which will no question impact hundreds of people, will have the most beneficial outcome, both for their business and for the workforce. And the longer that I've just been, I've been building businesses for, a little over 20 years now. I guess when you remove the pressure of how am I going to pay the bills or how am I going to make my mortgage payment, and you start to actually, in a sense, get an opportunity to just kind of breathe, I think that what I at least realize is that few things are more rewarding and more critical than just offering good employment, like just offering a good employment experience and just seeing the downstream effects of just bringing just the life and vitality that comes from being a great boss and offering that to your staff and just seeing what manifests from that in their lives. And so that's in part why we do these studies. There's no, I mean, it helps promote know-how, but ultimately there are easier ways to promote a company.
You give a resource who anyone who wants to use can actually use. And I think, I mean, you again hit on so many great points. You want to reduce friction, you want to state clearly what is demanded and asked. And then what I think for me that often combines, we have an industry especially with a lot of stakeholders involved. And like one of the principles that we operate along in Germany is kind of, if you reduce the number of people involved in any one process, you reduce the friction and the likelihood of it failing, right? Just have the people present and in action who are actually needed. And that then reduces turnaround time immensely, but much more than this reduced turnaround time and overall efficiency. It just reduces the stress and the annoying bits. Like when you are not getting hold of someone because you are in need of information, that is just the most annoying element of your work that you can have. So this is again one principle that we are trying to act on and deliver also with Magic Plan. Um, Put that person in a position to deliver everything they need right on time when they are on site. Because as soon as they then leave the job site, they don't need to worry about it. Everything is captured, everything is documented, sketches done, and they can basically pass on. And to bring that together, and I mean that added in a combination with, for example, know-how of really specking out clearly what is needed. I think this is one of our core principles to say, okay, reduce stakeholders, reduce friction, reduce turnaround time, which then helps again with those two elements for a satisfying job, less stress and a sense of achievement. But also then talking about that. So I think that is really what I like so much about what you are doing with those reports, with those books. It encourages people to talk, right? And that is one of, I don't know, uh, call it my leadership principle. I mean, you need to share what busies your mind for me to act on. It's like it's impossible to read everyone's mind. So we need that conversation. Without that conversation, nothing is ever going to change. And I mean, the dynamic between your managers and sub managers and why they are leaving. I mean, for if they had spoken with one another, maybe they would have understood each other better and actually stayed in place. So that conversational element is just like why it's us doing this today, but was what I also personally like so much about the resources you give to people who want to pick up on that. And I think that is also when I think of the common themes. I mean, the listeners, the people that we attract with our businesses are the ones who want to kind of like move themselves, move the industry, move their business forward. And so it's fun to be part of that dialogue. So yeah.
Well, two things that come to mind when you as you describe that. Um, I mean, our hope would be that earlier today I was reading through most recent issue of CNR magazine. Right, it's great resource in the industry, and I'm reading through it, and it's rich. It's got lots of content, and then I stumble upon an article from an individual. His name's Scott. He's from a very popular consulting firm called Floodlight Consulting, and in his article, he's included a graph from one of our studies to hit home one of his points, which was an important point that he was trying to make. And to me, like that really embodies what we're after. Is there was a point that he was trying to drive home, and I think within his own experience as an expert, he made his case, but then he was able to leverage what I hope is perceived as a trustworthy. We have a very rigorous approach to how we do these studies. It's because we want to be trustworthy, a trustworthy data point that, in a sense, helps him to emphasize and hit home, so to speak, a point that I think is essential in this case: the importance of high quality onboarding and support in those first few weeks. And so a person would never get an email from someone on our team being like, "Hey, we need some royalty or whatnot." Like, we would say, "Perfect." Like, that's just a perfect example. And there are changes that need to come in companies as the market and as the dynamics of the market accelerate and change with technology like magicplan and technology like hopefully know-how, as tools like that enter the market and as opportunities change, and we see the rising prevalence of these just disastrous catastrophic events like we see in LA and we saw with the storms last year. To me, like, the speed of change is such that there is all types of championing that has to happen. Team members at all levels of the strata of an organization, from the technician to the office administrator to a sales rep to a manager, they need to be able to identify a need or a pain and pair it with a solution, and then to be able to champion that to decision makers. And so our hope would be that, in many ways, these reports can be a resource that can help that champion to add some gravitas to what they're trying to say, so that it's not just kind of a subjective opinion, but it's actually supported by data, it's supported by broad themes and trends and patterns. Or a leader can come back, and rather than just, in a sense, just kind of, let's say, just shrugging off a suggestion and them saying, "Oh, I can never get anything past this manager or past this leader," for them to be able to, in an appropriate way, arm them, say maybe with a report, and say, "As you can see, within this industry, we're seeing an increasing move towards more and more companies beginning to spend less on physical equipment, or spending less on, say, office space, and embracing more remote models to reduce their operating costs, as we're starting to see a compression of margins in different, and so when that person can provide like some level of, let's call it, objective third party reasoning for either to support or perhaps to redirect that energy, I think that's valuable. But here's something that I wonder what you think about this, and I'll try to plate it correctly, because I don't want it to be misinterpreted. But so I'll start over here, and then I'll come over here to magicplan. And one of the reasons why I think magicplan is a great team, it's a great product. When you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States, one of the things that they've been saying for years is that the Hispanic community is increasingly occupying more and more of the labor workforce, right? And I think it's very positive. I grew up in a Hispanic context. I'm a dual citizen, Colombia and Canada, and so I'm favorable to that. But one of the things, if I just jump out here, one of the most prevalent data points that we see routinely come up again and again and again in our studies is that one of the most powerful, both things that attract workers to your company and retain your workers, is the sense of belonging and community that you can curate and create and offer to your team. In my experience, oftentimes cultures like, for example, the Hispanic community, they just culturally, in my opinion, do a better job creating and prioritizing community and connectedness than sometimes people like me, right? Where I can just be so focused and driven and set on my lane that I can be sometimes an island. And I think that there's a big opportunity in companies to be able to use technology to be able to receive and welcome and empower, some of these incoming workers, but not only because they're willing, able, but because they've grown up and they've been influenced by a culture that values something that is so imperative to the success of the workforce today: connection, community. You made a comment earlier. You said you recognize the opportunity and the efficiencies that are available when a person, let's say, streamlines how things get done, and shows and respects people enough to say, I don't think you need to be in this meeting, or I don't think it's essential that you're part of this process. And that level of, let's call it, I think that level of just that optimizing culture, to me, is actually in part a bit of a byproduct of, I think, the German culture that you come from. I mean, in my opinion, the German culture are masters of efficiency in engineering and thinking around how do we do things in as productive as possible manner. And I think, and you could decide that this is, a segment you edit out, but I think that is a huge competitive advantage that Magic Plan brings to the market, is that the culture of so many of the people that are part of that team have grown up in an environment that value efficiency, that value optimization, and that shows up, I think, in the decisions that you make. And in the same way, where this community, I think, has the potential to solve for belonging and connectiveness, if we can find a way to accommodate them and help them to have a vibrant experience. I think when you pair yourself with a team like Magic Plan, you benefit. You just benefit indirectly from the fact that there is an influence on that team that brings a level of optimization and efficiency that is hard to replicate. And I see that in the way that your team, when I interact with your team, um, I think they value outcome and output more than all the sacred cows that sometimes we create in our businesses.
I mean, I'm blushing right now. You framed out my cultural ignorance in the most positive way possible. um, but yeah, I mean that is also something you can't ignore your identity, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's probably who I am. So I think we are getting to a close, and I'm struggling for as kind words as you just had on me, but it was really the moment you started our keynote in Orlando. I was like struck by, okay, Leighton is a power communicator, and I think you bring that to your company because you are a masterclass of communication, which is something, repeating myself, I value greatly and I admire. So thank you for being part in Orlando. Thank you for being part of this call today. That can just invite anyone, check out that stuff. Maybe you find some inspiration in what we talked about today. Check out Know How, check out Magic Plan, and keep that conversation going. Thank you, Leighton.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, very welcome, and you keep up the great work. I'm excited for what lies ahead for Magic Plan and the way we collaborate with each other. So, thanks for having me.